for me, when I counsel people buying into a business, my advice is always, what can you do to lower your expenses?
Welcome to Business Buying for Financial Independence. I'm Tim Delaney, and I help young professionals buy small businesses so they can escape the 9 to 5 and take control of their time, income, and future. If that sounds like you, hit the subscribe button and let's get into it. Today, I have a guest who went from broke at 17 to owning dozens of businesses and generating over $500 million in revenue. Jerry Brazie is living proof that buying businesses can change your life. Jerry, welcome to Business Buying for Fi.
Tim, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
Anytime. Excited to hear a little bit more about your story today. I guess if you don't mind starting, just give us a little bit of background about that upbringing and about being broke and
Sure.
where that
It,
came from.
yeah, my story is I tell this to entrepreneurs and in particular to young people all of the time that I am the product of where I come from in spite of it and also because of it. So it's both sides, and I live that motto. The lessons I learned going through such a brutal childhood help me every single day in life today, and the good parts of my childhood, I came away with lessons that help me in running my businesses and things like that, every day. So I'm not one of these that look back on all of the trauma, and as you hear my story, you'll have some sense of it. For me, it was all just building blocks that I just continued to push forward on. I am 7 of 9 children. My parents had 6 kids when they were 23 years old, if you can believe that. That means my mother brought home an infant, and at home waiting for her was she had an infant, a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 5-year-old. So she had 6 kids that weren't yet 6 years old, if you can believe that. 7 years later, they had me, and I have a little brother and a little sister. They didn't want me to be an only child. Abject poverty, as you can imagine. I was born in 1969, a very different world from the world that we have today. And for most of your listeners, may or may not recognize the world that probably you and I grew up in, Tim, relative to what the world that people grow up in today. So abject poverty, and fought my way through it. I got my first job at 11 years old. I paid taxes, believe it or not, as an 11-year-old, and I've never not paid taxes in any year since I was 11 years old. I've always had a job. I was a street kid. No education, living on the streets at 17, living with hookers and heroin addicts in a $25 a week flop house, pulling down a full-time job. I should say I have been shot, stabbed, beaten within an inch of my life. I have 2 big epiphanies, one after one of those beatings, that really set the stage for what ultimately became my life and the things that I went on to do. And so I always knew how to work. I got a job working at a transportation company when I was 21 years old. I was running the thing by the time I was 25. And this is just basic running operations. Took that company from about $900,000 a year to $5 million a year. When I became too big a threat and the boss threatened to fire me, at the same time, I got an offer by an outside group to come start a business, and they would finance it for me. I had trained some of the people that were working for them, so they had some sense of who I was in operations. And I took the job, and after the first year, I did what I said I would do, which is I grew that company to $3 million. I average ticket price $12, and I grew it to $3 million in the first year. The problem was there's this little thing called cash flow, which that company, they didn't have the money to cover that kind of growth, even though I did the job that I was supposed to. They walked in and they fired me. I should say at 28 years old, they fired me for something that I didn't understand, by the way, cash flow. So I don't want to, I want to, throughout my whole story, I am self-taught. Everything I have, I've learned lessons, and I've taken those lessons and I've tried to apply them. So I bought a house when I was 20 years old because I read a story I read an article in a magazine about buying a house. I paid 12.5% interest on an $87,000 house. I didn't know what interest was or a mortgage payment. I had no idea. I didn't know what either one of those, and I'm 21 years old. I didn't know what either one of those things were. So I had to figure all of that out as I went. 30 days after they fired me, which was on the anniversary of the first year of that business, I went to all of my customers that I had moved from the previous business, and I got them to prepay me, my 6 largest customers, 2 of them paying 6 figures a month. I got them to prepay me. This is 4 banks and 2 title companies to continue to do their business, and that's how I financed that business that is still alive today I don't know, it's been 27, 28 years later. So at 29 years old, I started on that journey and pretty much was a kind of had it figured out and was a millionaire at 33 and have bought and sold and destroyed and grown and made mistakes, and I've lost fortunes and made fortunes along the way, and I've owned everything that I thought I could make or lose money at.
Awesome. That's quite an incredible upbringing and start to your story. What do you think it was that gave that group the confidence to hire some young kid to come run their new business?
Again, by this point, I was 28 years old, and I was, if everybody. I always say to people, I think it is a myth about do what you love. Follow your passion and do what you love. I think that's all BS, and I don't think that plays any part in business, at least in my I think, fairly significant experience with business, not only my own, but the hundreds of other ones that I've worked with. That do what you love is not one of my mantras. And so, in that context, I always say find things that you're good at that you can sell to other people to get them to pay you, and then you take the profit from that and you go do what you love. Go follow your passions. And so, in my case, my little shtick was that I had a mind for dispatch. So I could, this is pre-computers, right? I mean, I'm talking 5, 7, 800 orders a day on a piece on multiple pieces of paper spread out in front of me. I have a foot pedal and a mic, and I'm calling out 35, 40 drivers, directing them all day long. Just kind of the worst job you can imagine for 10 hours a day. I loved it. I loved every second of it. And so that's kind of how I cut my teeth. So I had that skill that people would look at and go, how do you talk to people and write things down and split things up and put prices in, and people are asking you questions and you're just going nuts. And I was like, I don't know how I do it. I just do it. Well, that started to gain some notoriety, and then you started to add some really, by today's standards, some computer power, very rudimentary, and the job just got easier, and so then therefore easier to train. So I kind of developed software along the way that kind of looked at the world the way that I did. How did I dispatch? How did I handle all of that so well? And we put this software together. Well, then the people start flocking to me because other people would have 5 or 6 dispatchers, and there'd just be me sitting there, right? And you added in the technology that we had built, which essentially was just what I saw in my head. We kind of got technology to do for us. Again, very rudimentary relative to today. And that brought the people in. And so I would train people either for the software, or I would train the dispatchers to go work at other companies. And so I had some sense, or people had some idea of who I was. I was running what then was a big company at $4 or $5 million, and had some reputation in the Northwest, and that's how they essentially heard about me. And then we did the dance, and off I went.
Nice. And then you essentially financed your own startup after that
Yeah.
crashed and burned by getting some prepayments. How did you fix your cash flow problem in your new business?
Well, so I got him to prepay me 2 ways. I got him to prepay me, and that was great. The first year in that first year in business, which was my second year in business and my second business, we did $4 million. I had 90 employees. We did $4 million. Now, appreciate too, and this is the story I want, or this is always the point I like to make to anybody listening, prospective entrepreneurs wise. You will not find somebody who knew less about business than I did, but I loved the idea and the game of business. Everything I learned from business at 26 years old, somewhere in there, I started really getting interested in it, was from a Forbes subscription and a Inc. subscription and a Fortune subscription. So I would read those every time, every month, every week, however often I could get my hands on them. And I really would try to absorb the lessons that I was learning. There's no internet or any of those things. So for me, it was really on the job, and having gotten fired, I kind of had a sense of what's this cash flow thing, right? I didn't know how that had worked. I should back up and say I had this epiphany. I was sitting at this desk at 28 years old. I'm running this big company. I got the offer from this group that was going to come in and finance me, and there was a pro forma, kind of a forward-looking prospectus on what the financials would look like. Well, I had always dealt with operations in this big busy place, and people were twice my age, and I was hot stuff, and no one could touch me, and people are coming to me, and how great I am. And I opened that up, and I didn't know what I was looking at. I'd never heard the word prospectus. I didn't know what forward-looking financials were. I didn't know what a balance sheet was, or P&L. I literally had no idea what I was talking about. Had I looked at that when I was 24 years old, I would have pushed it away and said no, because I wouldn't have recognized what I didn't know, and rather than embrace what I didn't know, I would have ran from it. But I had just had a son. My first son was born at 28 years old. I had a completely different take on life. I mean, my life changed like that the second my son was born, and all of a sudden I was much more open, and I was older at 28 to kind of what was going on. So, in looking at those financials, I had an epiphany, and the epiphany said, "Shut up and listen." Given this advice 1,000 times. Shut up and listen. You don't know anything. You think you're hot stuff, but there's this whole other world out there that you don't know anything about. You need to be quiet and listen. And so from that point forward, I really kind of got rid of all of my friends that I had grown up with. I grew up tough on the streets. You know, those relationships can be pretty strong. I was hanging at bars, walked in sports, playing sports, talking about sports, drinking and playing and watching sports. And I just got rid of that whole life, and I found people that were smarter than I was, who knew more things than I did, attorneys, accountants. I had to go find them. It was very, very uncomfortable. But in that environment, I had built up some sort of resources by the time I was 29 years old, had gotten fired, started my own, and had people that I could kind of throw things off of and say, hey, here's what I'm doing. And so then I started to learn about cash flow and how it works. That is when I was 30. So I grew that company 4 million the first year, 8 million the second year. And it's the second year at 30 years old, I bought that house back when I was 20 years old. I learned what an equity loan was. I had no idea what an equity loan was. I got really familiar with an equity loan using that house that I bought when I was 20 years old at 12.5% interest, and for 80 plus $1,000. I refinanced that house 3 different times over the course of the next 8 years as I build out my business to help finance cash flow and help finance the build, because the prepays only work so long. And then as the company grows, I was doing $14 million within my 4th year. So I was really learning at an exponential rate. So at an exponential rate, and you either learn how cash flow works or you're out the door.
Yeah, that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize is when you're growing a business at that speed, it seems to the outside that you must be doing awesome. You must be buying luxury yachts and
Yeah.
mansions in Switzerland or wherever. But in reality, when you grow that fast, you have a really hard time keeping up with paying the bills at the same time.
I didn't get paid. I refereed basketball games at night, 5 days a week, making $22 to $24 a game to pay my bills and to keep the lights on for 4 years. So until I was 31 years old, I didn't get a paycheck, and I was doing $14 million a year in revenue.
Yeah,
To your point,
crazy.
I learned how to sell. I had learned how to sell profitably. I learned how to operate. I didn't know how to operate profitably. And to your point, it is a big difference. There is a huge disconnect. I got asked yesterday on a podcast, what would I tell myself or a new business owner going into it that I didn't know? And I didn't know that cash flow is the same as the blood in your veins. Without it, it's not even worth being there. And even today, I still am not nearly as do what I say, not what I do kind of program, because I love to go sell and add and do all sorts of things. And I really, even at 56 years old, after 30 years in the game, have to I got to remember that cash flow.
Yep. Yeah, it is. It is a crucial piece of business. Without cash flow, your business will fold.
That's right.
And that brings up, so you started this business from scratch, and that kind of brings up one of the things that I like to talk about is buying businesses.
Hmm.
Not that you can't run into cash flow issues when you buy a business as well, but one of the things that I like about buying an existing business, especially a profitable business, is that there is some structure in place, and in theory, a healthy margin that should allow you to continue to cash flow as long as you buy correctly and don't over leverage. What got you into buying businesses? So what was your first acquisition?
Gasoline.
Okay.
So I'm running a transportation company. I have 240 employees. I'm looking at the bills, and one of my largest bills is gasoline. And I said, well, there's got to be some margin in there that I'm not getting. How do I make more money? You know, when you have a resource like a company doing $10 million a year, there are a myriad of ways to make money that the person even that might have ran it to 10 million, you spend all your time running it up there. It could be 5 million. This could be 2 million. I'd be hard pressed if you didn't put me in a room with any business owner and I'm going to find money they don't see. It's just because the reverse is true for me. If somebody experienced came in from the outside, if you came in and looked at my businesses, you're going to say, why are you doing that? And I'm going to, God damn, There it is. It's right there in front of me. It's been sitting there the whole time, and I never see it because you kind of have you're in the hole and you're just fighting every battle and digging away. And meanwhile, the guy outside goes, "I don't know why you're digging this hole. It's bright blue sky." And you're like, "What?" It's got that nature to it. So at 10, maybe by this time I'm 10, $12 million a year, and I'm like, man, that gas bill's gigantic. There's got to be margin in there I'm missing. So I went and bought a gas station, and that turned into 2 gas stations, and that turned into car washes, convenience stores, gas stations. Along with it was real estate. I knew what I had done with my house, and so I rented my first building. Well, I should say I started that company. I was doing $2.5 million a year annualized in the first 6 months of the second business I started out of a condemned house across from a big shopping mall. It's not even there anymore. There's a storage unit there because it was free and it had no doors on it. I'm running drivers and dispatching because I couldn't find real estate fast enough to turn over in that first 30 days. Remember, I got fired and the iron was hot. The customers are ready to move. I had already moved them a year earlier. They had some sense of it. They had a belief and a trust in me. And so I had to move. So I literally moved into a condemned house. I had employees answering phones and customer service in big parkas because it was February and we're going to work. So I rented my first place. After that. And then when that lease ended at 5 years, I started buying real estate because I'd learned the real estate game such as it was from that house that I bought. Since then, I've developed and bought and sold and done more real estate than I can shake a stick at. At one point, I was owned and managed 150,000 square feet of industrial space. I just used the business, that main core business, to go add businesses. Some of them, I've lost fortunes. I've made fortunes, right? I mean, that's the nature of the game. I'm super aggressive, but wherever I thought I could make money, and I've amended that, like I said in my intro, to make and lose money, I would go and give it a try and take a shot. So really, it was just I was buying too much gas and I didn't like paying rent. Those two things kind of drove me to find, because they were my two biggest items aside from payroll.
Yep. I get asked all the time, where do I find a business? How do I figure out what business to buy? And one of the things that I tell people, if they don't already own a business, take a look at your credit card statements. Where are you spending the most money? What can you do with
Yeah.
that? Do you have any interest in those things? And essentially what you did was the same thing. You took your profit and loss statement from your existing business and said, what is my biggest expense and how can I turn that into an asset? And you
Yep.
went out and bought the gasoline stations. That's
And
awesome.
I've saved a quarter a gallon, right?
Yep.
To a gas station owner, right? The gas station margins are good, but they're not fantastic. The convenience store margins are better. Car wash margins are fantastic. And you put it all together and it's a good business. But when you're buying tens of thousands of gallons every single month, a quarter matters, 15 cents matters. And so I bought all my gas from myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you're presumably there were still functioning gas stations. You have other customers on top of that. So
Correct. Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
they were retail gas stations just like
Yep.
you would expect. And I mean, I owned them for, I don't know, 10 years, and I sold them all together and did very well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
What is one thing that you were, so these gas stations they have that retail component to them as well.
Yeah.
What was some of the challenges you faced when trying to analyze the gas station from a purchase perspective?
Cash. So gas stations and companies like that, if you're a smart operator, you're taking as much cash as you can, right? The problem is cash doesn't make it to the tax returns. So somebody may tell me that the company's doing X, but it all goes to the tax returns that say Y. And there is always a disconnect with owners if they're not experienced on how this works, that the tax returns have to match. There's just no two ways around that. And if they don't match, then I can only pay you what's on the tax returns. But so often for gas stations, and that's changing over time. When I owned them a decade ago, we got about 65% of the revenue came from credit cards, and 35% came from cash. It's got to be much higher than that it is today. So that chasm's probably not quite as wide as it was when I was doing it. But that was always one of the biggest impediments is I can only pay you what's on the tax returns. I understand. I can see the gallons you're pumping, so I understand that there's more revenue going through here than what is on your tax returns, but I can only pay you for the tax returns. That was number one. And then number two, in terms of gas stations in particular, it's very hard to get approval from the for whatever provider they're using. The supplier approval is a pain in the butt. You got to go through classes and do all sorts of things. And I had two different ones that I worked with, and so I had to do it twice, even though I had experience. And it just there's a level of complexity there. So those two things are the most. But on top of all of that is the number one thing, and this is the number one answer I will give if you or anybody asked me about buying a business or starting a business. What's the one thing I wish I knew then more than anything else? And this is true in buying a business or starting a business: is the government is not your friend. The government has no interest in your success.
Mhm.
The government, they don't care. It doesn't matter local, city, state, federal. I have been involved with the government. I have fought with the government. I have been subjected to the government. I've done developments. I've done gas stations. I built, bought, and sold more things than I can shake a stick at. And the government is it makes me sad to see new entrepreneurs or even guys that have been in the game for a while and they want to try to branch out. They try to do the things that we're talking about, Tim, and they just, particularly on the West Coast and up in the Northeast, it is brutal. And so I think that any good entrepreneur going into this game should know, and if you're looking to buy a business like I did many times, in particular something like a gas station or car wash, anyone that involves water and things going underground and chemicals and oil, the government is not your friend. There's a place for government, I'm not saying that, but they have zero interest or care in your deal getting closed. They don't care about deadlines. They care that they do not have the best interest of me and them at heart in order to pay their bills. There's a huge disconnect there.
Yep. Yeah, that's I operate in New York State, and we've had
Oh my God.
issues with septic inspections, and
Yes.
I know a family member that's been sued by the state environmental corporation for a gas tank that leaked underneath a property that was there from before they owned it, and they had sold it, and it was still somehow their responsibility. But yeah, that's there's definitely challenges
I'll
with
tell
the
you
government.
one quick
Yep.
story around that. I owned a square city block across the river from downtown Portland, right in the heart of Portland, Oregon. And I decided to have an employee slash customer barbecue one summer in my parking lots in front of my building. Now, the backside of the building were a bunch of homeless, and we had complained to the fire department, I don't know how many times, because they set my building on fire 3 times because they have a big 50-gallon burn barrel, 55-gallon drum burn barrel that they're burning out of, and they just don't care. And so we would call. Nothing ever happened. Nothing. I started to have a barbecue, bringing a big barbecue, tents, the whole 9 yards. It's hot. It's August, Portland, Oregon. Customers coming in. I wasn't there an hour. In comes the fire marshal. Somebody had ratted me out. And the fire marshal wants to know what's going on here. And he says, y'all can't be here. I'm sorry, as a female, y'all can't be here selling, can't doing what you're doing. I said, selling? These customers and my employees are driving through in their trucks and getting a free hamburger. What are you talking about selling? Oh, well, I needed to come investigate. I was like, hey, while you're here, we've called 5 million times. They're setting my building on fire back behind. Can't help you with that. Can't help you with that. That to me is, I have 1,000 stories, probably you do too, Tim, but to the people listening, you have to be aware of the government. That your ideas might be great. You have to be aware of the fight you're going to have by what I think is predatory government overreach.
Yeah, I mean, it just the lesson I think is also just don't rely on anybody else. You gotta put in the work yourself. You know, you might have
1,000%.
other good business people if you get into certain masterminds and coaching programs, that people you can lean on and get advice from. But at the end of the day, you got to rely on yourself and
Yeah.
do the work. Don't expect anybody else to come in and help you out. I know, you go back to COVID and other things, other emergency situations where the government steps in and tries to help, but a lot of times they cause more chaos than they actually end up helping at the end of the day. Because
COVID was a night in my circle, which is small business, less than $20 million, of which I know hundreds of people. It was devastating. COVID was, there's nothing to compare COVID to. Most of those businesses, half of those businesses are gone. COVID in particular, 2 suicides from 2 multi-generational companies where the sons and the grandsons were so distraught. And those guys aren't here with us anymore because they lost the company through no fault of their own. So I'm with you. That one cut deep. That COVID was a nightmare.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so gas stations, car washes, real estate, any particular one of those businesses that you like more than the others, especially for somebody that's never run a business before?
Um, if you were looking to buy something that you can I just had this conversation with a couple of young guys, 28 and 30 years old, came to me and they wanted to talk about this and what they should do, and they thought about starting a gym, and I was like, "That's great. I wouldn't start a gym. Here's the economics of starting a gym, and here's how it's gonna work against you, and you gotta have a full-time job doing another job while you're starting a gym because there's no income and all that." I said, "But go find a gym. Go find somebody that has a gym and buy the gym from them, and it's set up, and then you can make it what you want it to be." And so we had that conversation, and that's what they really want to do. And they were smart enough to say, smart only because some people ask good questions, some people don't. I always say though that there there are no dumb questions, just people too dumb to ask them. And so in that context, they asked me what would I do in their situation, and I said I would go buy a car wash. Car wash is a business that people can gas stations right along there too, but car wash margins are fantastic. You're gonna pay 10, 12, $15 to get your car washed. That thing costs anywhere from 90 cents to a buck 50. That's the operating cost to actually wash your car. Now you got everything else that goes with it. But again, a margin like that, you hit 100 cars a day, that 101st car is 100% profit essentially, right? I mean, it's 90% profit. So those are really good businesses, and they're businesses that the average person can understand. The car goes in, car goes out. There's some mechanicals, there's a phone number to call, how the system works. Again, it's complicated, but it's not too complicated. And it's something that anybody can understand. Car washes, gas stations, convenience stores, those go hand in hand with that kind of business. Another business that I've been seeing a lot lately is like dog services, dog hotels. There's one right up the street from me, does $2.5 million a year right here in just south of Nashville, Tennessee. These things have come out of nowhere. I mean, they've been around for a long time, but that the spend on that just continues to go up. That's a business anybody could do. High barrier to entry because you got to spend money to build it out and get a spot and all of that. But if you could find somebody willing to sell it, to your point, that's something there. But I'm again not the guy. You look at your credit card report, find what you can make money at. I love that idea, right? What can you sell to somebody the same way and make money at? That's a great idea. But there are a lot. There are a lot of simple businesses. The flip side to that is these guys thought that they were going to go and buy an HVAC company that they had located, and the owner wanted to sell. And I said, "Well, what do you know about HVAC?" Nothing. So they thought that they were gonna buy the business, and then the people that do the business is just gonna run. I was like, "No, no, 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 no. You're paying for the money that business makes, so there's no money for you.
Yep.
You're gonna have to go
Yeah.
do something else or learn how to do that HVAC business." And again, for me, when I counsel people buying into a business, my advice is always, what can you do to lower your expenses? Right, so can you get rid of a crew and you go do the HVAC yourself? Right, well, who's gonna do the sales? Oh, you are.
Yeah.
Right, well, who's gonna
Yeah.
answer the phone? Well, you
You
are.
are. Yeah.
Right? Who's gonna do the book? Well, you are. And I gotta go out and work in the field? Yes, that's how it
Yeah.
works. And so but in that context, that wouldn't work because you need to know something about HVAC. You don't need to know anything about pumping gas necessarily or washing cars or walking dogs or houses or anything. You just have to put the work in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I would expect you're not going to buy a dog walking service if you hate dogs or scared of dogs or
Yeah, for sure.
have never walked a dog.
For sure.
But,
Yes, right.
and the same thing applies to the HVAC. That's a huge topic right now. I see that in online business buying circles all the time. People go out and buy a bunch of HVAC companies and roll them up and sell them to somebody else. And maybe that's what they're teaching in MBA schools, and maybe it can work for certain people, but to your point, if you're not willing to get in there and do some of the work yourself to start out with and really learn and understand the business, it's going to be tough going
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and I'm glad you said that. And to these 2 young men that came in to talk to me, we spent a good amount of time together. We went and had dinner, and they came into it based on what they saw on the internet. They came into it based on what influencers were telling people to do. And I said, "Look, I know there's 2 types. There's the 100 millionaire, multi-billionaire influencer that's out there telling people what to do and how to chase your dreams and how to run business. And then there's the 26-year-old that has never done any of that, but he read a book, right? Or he's really good at communicating, and he tells everybody how to do business. And if you're working more than 5 minutes a day, and not making $1 million a month, you're not doing it right. While he takes a picture in front of a Lamborghini he sees on the freeway. None of those in my experience. So I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying that in my experience, and my experience is vast across hundreds of businesses, and I'm more entrepreneurs than I can shake a stick at. I belong to a group that changed my life, a peer-to-peer group that changed my life when I was second year in business. All of those guys, everybody I've ever come across, struggled, worked hard, was in the middle of it, up to their necks in their businesses. I don't know the roll-up program. I don't know how any of that is even possible. I've never seen somebody pull that off. I read stories about it, and those stories are always with people with more money than God and less to care about. But for you and I and the rest of us 30-odd million small businesses out here, the majority of which are solopreneurs, very few have even 100 employees, just realize this is bread and butter. This is you doing the work and you making the money.
Yep. Yep. And there's nothing wrong or with setting a goal of doing the work for 2, 3, 5, 10 years
That's the point.
and
Yeah.
then getting out of it and sitting back a little bit more if that's what you want,
Right.
hiring the people once you've built up that profitability where you can still take a check yourself and pay that full-time manager to do what you need to do to keep the business running.
Right.
That's the
Yes.
I again, that's you see people online talking about don't buy yourself a job, don't buy yourself a job, buy a business that operates all by itself. And yeah, sure, great. If you have
And it
X
doesn't.
millions of dollars laying
That's right.
around, then you may as well buy shares of Google and Microsoft at the same time
And
and
no
call it a
one will
day.
ever care about your business like you do. No, I mean, it's again back to the government. It's real easy for the government. They point a gun at us and take our money and then they go spend it. That's simple, right? But the hardest thing to do in the world is go out and sell profitably. Anybody can sell, right? Selling unprofitably is fairly simple.
Yep.
Selling profitably, that's where it gets really difficult.
Yep.
And so if you can sell profitably, that's the hardest thing to do in business. It's harder than the operations. It's harder than anything else. What's easy to do? Lose 20 pounds or gain 20 pounds? Well, it's the inverse in business. It's easy to lose an account. It is hard to get an account. You got to work 1,000 times harder for one than the other. And so in that context, yeah, it's you've got to be in the middle of it, and you can't trust other people. You've got to be on top of it if you are like the majority of us out here that are just entrepreneurs trying to make their way.
Yep. Um, any tips on finding businesses to buy? So when you decided that you wanted to buy a gas station or you wanted to reduce your gas cost, how did you go about finding gas stations for sale?
For me, it was just by this time there was some internet presence. I think my first gas station I got referred to. So that was a big part, right? It's just referrals, and I think this was still in the day of ads and magazines and things of that nature. But by the time it came around to the second one or the third one, well, but the second one, I bought a Shell station that had gone bankrupt. Two sisters had owned it, and it had gone back to the dealer. And somebody I had a conversation with at some point in the past had my name and gave it to the Shell rep, who then called me. And that's a big deal. And I know you know this, Tim, and anybody doesn't know it. Go to the groups, go to the meetings, go make contacts, go stand in a corner and look sheepish and figure out how to have conversations and what do people do, because you just don't ever know when that's going to pay off. And in this case, a phone rang, and it's like, "Hey, I own X, Y." And it was a big gas station provider. They ran gas stations on behalf of Shell in Portland. They had taken it back because they were providing the fuel. Knew I had owned the one right up the street and had had a conversation with somebody who knew that that was what I was doing, and called me and sold it to me for pennies on the dollar. Just because the girls had gone bankrupt, but they wanted somebody to run. I ended up putting a car wash in that one and cleaning it all up, and we did really well when we sold it. I didn't make a lot of money on a monthly basis on that thing, but over the course of 7 or 8 years, I sold it for a real good return. And so really, it's the internet today makes it so much easier. Biz, buy, sell, sites like that just make it really super easy. But I say on my videos and on podcasts, and I sign off on all my videos the same way. I say opportunities are everywhere. You got to go get them. And so that's why I say, you know, if you want to go into business, I would avoid going in, if you want to be a florist and that's your dream, I'd be careful and really careful because you can get tunnel vision and you're not looking at things that maybe you could make better money at and then go get a floral company. But those opportunities are ever, you got to look for them. So you just got to have your head up on a swivel and put yourself in places where those conversations are taking place. That might be online, but it also might be in a room full of other people. And pretty much every city has groups that get together that are business minded.
Yeah, I tell people just show up at the Chamber of Commerce meetings, the Lions
That's it.
clubs, the Rotaries, whatever.
Yes.
And to your point, letting people know what you're looking for, letting people know what you want to do,
Yep.
because they'll remember that when they're talking to that, they have that other random conversation a week, a month, a year later, and
Could be
Tim,
years later.
Tim said
Yeah.
something about being interested in that, and
Right.
it helps. The more specific you can be, the better it is as well. But
Yep.
you don't, if you're not zeroed in yet, that's okay as well. Just let people know. Um, what about after post acquisition? How did you handle transitions? Did you bring your company culture into these other places as you bought them?
Yeah, I would say one of the most almost every question probably that you have asked me or are going to ask me, I could start with this, and so I'll put this out there: is I belonged to this peer-to-peer group. If you don't have a mentor,
Mhm.
and you don't have to pay for them necessarily. Side note: I should say I just started a new peer-to-peer group, the Kronos Group, and I'm really excited about it. But find a business owner. Most aspiring entrepreneurs or even employees think that business owners are, I don't know, up here and they're unapproachable. And I'm telling you what, I can't talk about. I love business. I love the game of business. I love your business. I love my business. I love all businesses. I want to know how everything works. I love to have conversations about businesses. The more I can have, the better. And certainly I love talking about my business, but I like talking about it in the context of what I can do to help you get your business started. And so that is a critical part. So anytime I did these moves, for the most part, I belonged to this group. A peer-to-peer group there was 9 of us, and they were all way older. I mean, I'm 31 years old, 30 years old. They're all in their 50s. And I just sat back for 3 years. The first 3 years of this group, you get together every month for 4 or 5 hours. Everybody gets a half an hour, goes around the table. There's a chairman. He was a Fortune 500 CEO, and he kind of directed it. And you just go back and forth, and you get the wisdom of the crowd, right? You get the chairman's know-how after, he was 70 years old and had a ton of experience. But this guy here says, I have a banking relationship that's gone south, and here's why. And this guy over says, I just dealt with this, and here's what I did. And so you get to jump all of the deals and all of the issues you might have in my peer group that I belong to with those guys. Anytime I was making, I had the biggest company in the group, but that was fine. I just shut up and listened, back to my epiphany at 28 years old. And so I was able to, whatever the problem was, ask a group of experienced operators, and in many occasions just absolute killers for business, and they were able to give me that feedback. So whether you belong to a group, I'd love you to check out the Kronos Group or any other group. Find a mentor, a single guy, a broker that's going to help you that has enough experience, guys like Tim with experience. People will talk to you, and it is absolutely invaluable. I would not recommend anyone start a business, and particularly once they've bought that business, get a mentor. Get somebody that can direct you, because that'll be critical to helping you. And to a long-winded question or answer to your question, I had that group. And so anytime I did anything, I said, okay, I bought this business. First one I ever bought, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I mean, I know how to run this business. Do I go over there and run this business the way I run that business? And essentially the answer was yes, right? I folded them all together. There are offsite gas stations, and there's an office with people, running this company, and the transportation company, and I had development companies. But everybody worked essentially out of the same general office, and so everyone's connected. So when we had parties, everybody was invited. And I wanted that same approach to business across whatever the business was. And I didn't differentiate much other than, you have different rules for each business. So I've always been super hands-on too. So I was hands-on out there, the same as I was hands-on, back to our points from a few minutes ago. So really, it was just bringing people into my system and the way that I did things in the context of each business kind of runs, has a different set of rules.
Yeah. Yeah. That's peer-to-peer business groups are so important. I absolutely love being part of numerous groups,
Yeah.
for real estate, for business. There's some that I don't pay a thing for, and there are some that I have dropped a substantial amount of money on. And you don't, there's things that I've gotten out of those that I don't get out of the free ones. But you can get whatever you put into them, you can get out. It doesn't have to cost you a fortune. But going back to so you're young, you've got a very high revenue business. What was it like having to write that check or spend that money on that group? What made you realize at a young age that that was worth the money that you were going to spend?
I knew, I knew by the time I was 30 years old, I knew what I didn't know. Right? I was tuned into what I didn't know. And the chairman came in and he sat down with me and he said he did a sales call first. And I was like, okay, I'll talk to this guy. Sounds interesting. He came in, sat down. And again, he's 70 years at the point he's, 60 years old. And he came in and sat down, and I'll never forget what he told me. The thing that stuck with me, I don't know how long the meeting was, but here I was hot and brash and the company growing and all these other things. I may be doing $8 million a year. By the way, I didn't know that that wasn't normal, by the way, I should point out. I didn't know that the average company in those days was doing 200 to 400 grand a year, and now it's probably 400 to 800 grand a year. I didn't know that 8 million a year wasn't normal because that had just been my normal every day since I had started. But so he came in, recognized that it was abnormal, but he also recognized how much I didn't know. And the advice he gave me, which goes right along with what you said, that has resonated with me all these years later, was you can't afford not to. So my group that I'm putting together, the Kronos group, it's a peer-to-peer group, but it's not cheap. You're going to spend it, but you let me into your business. You're going to make the group is like I said, that same sort of environment, one day a month, and you get together for 4 or 5 hours and everybody goes back and forth. But then you get an hour with me and we get to just sit every month and go over what's important to the business. Those two things combined, I think in that day I was paying $600 or $700 a month, a fortune. Remember, I wasn't getting paid. Right. So I joined this group for $500, $600, $700 a month, and I wasn't getting paid. But he had convinced me that it was something that I had to have. And man, was he right. That group, I don't know what the return on that group was. I couldn't calculate it. Right. It was tough writing those checks every month, but it was by far, and it took me very little time to figure out that as long as I was willing to listen, by far, it was the best money that I ever spent. For two reasons. Number one, you get the advice if you're in a good group that's led correctly and everybody's not, there to just rah, but we're there to do business and be killers and work hard and, try to get everybody to succeed. But also a chairman that leads it in such a way that information flows freely without, too many feelings getting hurt. And then you got to go face him because he's going to show up at your office or on a Zoom call, the next couple of days and go, remember all that stuff you agreed to? Have you done it? And I found that to be absolutely uncomfortable and challenging and fantastic, and it held me accountable. So the thing about a peer-to-peer versus a mastermind, just frankly, a mastermind for me, operationally in terms of on the ground, I never really had a lot of benefit from masterminds because they kind of dealt with, and I'm not throwing shade on them, I'm just saying for me, that peer-to-peer every month, put the time in. Jerry, I don't have time. You can't afford not to time-wise. Where am I going to find 4 hours? It's like I was working 18-hour days running my companies. I was refereeing basketball games at night, and I took half a day off once a month to go to that group. It was the best money that I ever spent. I don't know if that was your question. I'm sorry, Tim. If that is what you asked me.
Basically the question, because I hear that pushback a lot from people and I'd love to, but I can't justify spending X number of dollars or the time or both. And
Right.
I think that if you find the right group, it's worth every penny plus some. It's impossible to quantify, as you said. The
Yep.
returns on those things are
Cheap.
really
If you're doing 7 figures a month or anywhere near 7 figures or higher, it's cheap. And that 7 figures might be if you're doing 800 grand, if you're doing 8 million, if you're doing 15 million. You unleash somebody like me on your business and you're doing 15 million. I promise you I'll find 5 to 10%. Yep. It's just,
awesome.
I mean, that's not a brag. That's just reality because I've had people come in my business doing those numbers and find 5% and me sitting there going, I work this every day. I'm as aggressive as I can be. And he's like, yeah, I know, but you're in the hole.
Yep. Fresh set of eyes does a lot.
Fresh set of eyes, yeah. Yeah, and then you do that over time. I mean, I was in that group for 20 years. We were together. Those guys are all in their 70s and 80s now. We get together once a year.
That's awesome.
Invaluable.
Yep.
And again, dog in the fight, it's so invaluable. I've always if I I'm going to go back on a little bit of advice I gave earlier, doing what you love. I've always wanted to start a peer-to-peer group. This has been
Hmm.
going on. I've been in the group now 20 years, right? So, well, longer than that. I'm 56, 25 years. And I've always wanted to start one. And I just said this year, I did a video at the beginning of the year and I said, I'm just going to do it this year. And then I've been talking about it forever. My mother and dad are 87 years old. I was at dinner with them in Portland a couple of months, or right at the turn of the year. And they're like, look, you either got to go do it or shut up because you've been talking about this for a long time. And I was like, okay, there we go. So we're just literally just starting it up. And if there was anything that I would be passionate about, I'm going to get paid to do it 100%. And it's a for-profit business. I'm not covering that up. But at the same time, I love business and I love giving advice. Most of my advice that's valuable comes from all the mistakes I made. You're going to pay me to hear the things I've screwed up. You're going to pay me for my 7-figure mistakes. You're going to pay me for the 6-figure mistakes I've let employees make on my behalf, right?
Yeah.
You're going to pay me for the things that I've lost, not necessarily the things that I've made. And that's just invaluable. And if I had a passion along those lines, it would be business. But regardless, peer-to-peer groups or a mentor, find one. And that was one of the first things I would do when I bought when I was buying my first business.
Awesome. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. Anything else you want to add about the Kronos Group or about your story or any advice going out?
Yeah, let me give you a story that kind of set the stage for where I am, and it's important when it comes to managing. I always say, which is ultimately what you're going to do if you're going to become an entrepreneur. But this goes for employees also. I put this to work as I grew through the ranks running other people's companies before I ran mine, and that is that I say that a good manager gets a employee to do for them what they want them to do, but let them think it's their idea. So you don't need any of the accolades. And that comes from, I'm going to tell you a quick story. I was 14 years old and I had a bank card. And when I'm 56 years old. So back in the day, a poor kid from the streets gets a bank card. You get your name on anything. It's a big deal when you're poor. And so I had this bank card and I had $85 in the bank and you had to keep $5 in the bank. In those days, I don't know if you have to do that anymore, but in those days you had to get $5. And I had this card that I got to use. This was magic to a kid born in the 60s. And so I got the money out, but I'm a street kid, 14 years old, and I got jumped. And they took all $80, my wallet, everything else. They beat me. They broke 2 ribs. They broke my nose, blacked both my eyes, damn near killed me, rolled me under a bus stop on a busy street in southeast Portland, left me for dead middle of summer. I wake up 2 hours later. I got blood down my front. Both eyes are black. I'm miserable. And now I got to go home where there's nobody waiting. I get on a bus. I go to a transfer point. I pass out under a tree. I wake up. It's dusk. I get on another bus, got to go to transfer. I get off. Now I got a 2-mile walk. I could take you. I was 14 years old. The year before, my sister had died on her 21st birthday. My older sister, 1 year, she was like my mother, 7 years older than me, the next child above me. And 6 months earlier, I went blind in my right eye. So I was having a year. So now I get this beating. But this is kind of the life that I lived. I get off the bus and I start the walk, and I'm miserable. I remember this like it was yesterday. And I can take you, as I go to Portland once a month. I do business back there every month, and I'm there once a month. I will go about every other trip to this square of cement. The thing about cities is some things never change. Right there before I went over the interstate freeway. And as I stepped on this big oversized square, a voice behind me to my right, this true story, out loud, so much so that I turned thinking that it was the duplex. Someone was yelling at me through a window, and it said, "Everything is your fault. Whatever you do going forward, it's your fault." And I'm like, wait, what? Who? Number one, who's talking to me? Number two, now I'm delirious. I'm beaten. I mean, they really put it to me. And the voice said, everything's your fault. Everything you do going forward is your fault. No one's going to help you. That was it. And I was like, that's the craziest thing. I'm going mad. This is nuts. Went home, by the way, I have a little nub on my nose where I held my nose for 3 days shut because it kept separated until it held shut. But that was my life. Broke a couple of ribs that still bother me to this day. The long story short, though, that message resonated with me so much that I adopted that going for, it wasn't a hockey stick, but over the years, as I escaped that poverty and escaped all of those worlds, and I'd been stabbed and all kinds of other stories, but I started to get out and I started to go up. And as I started to go up, it was always from the context of, it's all my fault. So no one had any power over me. Nobody could hold any sway over me. I never made any excuses. When I made a $100,000 mistake that an employee made, it was my fault. I allowed them to do that. When things didn't go my way that should have, that I didn't have any control over, whatever it might be, it's always my fault. And I found that as an entrepreneur, taking responsibility for everything without the emotion that goes towards blaming somebody else is one of the absolute superpowers that I was lucky enough to have gone through. And so that beating that I took, that near-death experience where that voice, Jiminy Cricket, God, I don't know who it was or what it was, telling me that advice has served me through thick and thin, making fortunes and losing fortunes, because I take responsibility for everything. And to any possible business owner, if you're thinking about it or you're doing it now and you're struggling with those employees, I'm telling you, the release is it's just all your fault. And then go to work. Doesn't mean that they're not wrong, that they didn't do something wrong, but why did you let it happen? What things do you have in place that made that happen? It'll make you more money and it'll make your life much easier, I believe.
100% agree. Extreme accountability, take ownership.
Yep.
That's the way to live life, especially
Yep.
in business. Great advice to close out here, Jerry. Really appreciate your time. I will put
Absolutely.
links to the Kronos group in the show notes, and I would encourage you to follow Jerry on social media as well. He puts out some great videos and content. Anywhere else or anything else you want to let people know about
Yeah,
where to
just
find you?
Jerry at Jerry Brazie, Jerry Brazie on Instagram. But really, the Kronos Group is my new business, and that's the one I'm running multiple other businesses, but I'm really excited about this new one. Is the Kronos. Kronos was the god of time. I thought that was a great thing to have for entrepreneurs. So thekronosgroup.org, and go check it out and reach out. And look, if that's not for you, give me a call. I'm happy to help anybody. I will talk to anybody about anything. I love the game of business, so don't be shy.
You're a lot like me. I enjoy it as well. I enjoyed this
Yep.
conversation, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future, Jerry. Really appreciate you being on the podcast. And thank you
Absolutely.
all for listening. Would really appreciate you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and we'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks for listening to Business Buying for Financial Independence. If you're serious about owning your time and building long-term wealth, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.